going back to the draft for a second, the one that I was personally surprised about, because the way that this mock draft shapes up, at least the lottery portion, is the Flyers have the opportunity to pick between Carter Yakemchuk and Berkly Catton. And I make the point in the mock draft that I personally would pick Berkly Catton. But I do not think it is outlandish to think that if the Flyers were posed that option, especially if they don't think Berkly Catton can stick down the middle, they might go with Yakemchuk. They might say, we think he can be a number one defenseman. We would rather have a number one defenseman than a number one winger because we already have a number one winger, we think, in Matvei Michkov. If we don't think he's a center, we're going to go with Yakemchuk. I made that point in the article. I hold to it, and I don't think it would be a reach. It would just be they prefer one really good prospect over another really good prospect. I really like Yakemchuk too. So I don't think it would be an insane reach or a stupid decision. It would just be their personal preference. What was interesting to me, though, is the more I looked at it, I thought to myself, if the Flyers don't take Catton and he slips to 12, I don't know if Minnesota does, because one thing that Bill Guerin has been getting across both in exit interviews and also via, maybe not via it's him, but like people like Michael Russo, who are very plugged in Minnesota, is this idea that he thinks that Minnesota is too small. There's been some scattered rumors, we've talked about them, that they might be willing to trade Marco Rossi because they think they're too small up front. Wow. If they're willing to explore the possibility of moving Marco Rossi, I'm skeptical they would then that month draft Berkly Catton, another small-ish center/winger type guy with the 13th overall pick. And it just made me think, like, man, if Catton's available at 12 and the Flyers don't take him, like, does Catton slip to 14? Does he slip to 15? Like, could he be a guy who slips, especially if there's a run on defensemen? If Minnesota's like, we need a big guy, we're going to take that big Norwegian defenseman who's rising, then you're going to San Jose. San Jose, we assume, is taking Macklin Celebrini with the first overall pick, but they have Will Smith that they took last year. He just signed, yeah. Yeah, so then it's like, okay, do they take Berkly Catton? I projected them to take him because I'm like, look, San Jose just needs talent. So, but would they look at it and say, well, do we really need another like smallish center if we already have Celebrini, who's not small, but he's not big, and then Will Smith's another one of those guys who are like not super small, but he's not big. Maybe they think, we'd rather have a Cole Yzerman than a Berkly Catton. Does Berkly Catton slip to 15, 16, 17? These are just some interesting things that came to mind when I was going through this draft of, there are guys who could maybe slip further than we think they will.
Because of the premium on defensemen and how there's definitely going to be that run on them where it's like, well, shit, they're starting to go. We got to get ours.
That's what I really think is going to happen.
I think this is going to be an interesting draft, not just because the Flyers have a couple of picks, also where teams like San Jose have their second pick. Like, okay, we're getting Celebrini. What else do we need?
Right.
Do you suddenly start drafting for need? Like, do teams start to? I think it's going to be like the middle of the first round is going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
looking forward to this draft.
And we've seen this happen before. Look at Matt Barzal in his draft year. I mean, I thought he was a guy who I liked at 7. Even over Provorov, and he slips to the late teens. The Islanders get an absolute steal, and now he's a stud. I mean, that could easily happen to somebody like Cole Yzerman or Berkly Catton.
What if Boston has 3 straight picks and they don't take anybody good?
Speaking of that, it is very funny to me. Like, how many times over the last 5 years has Jake DeBrusk been traded in the media and he's still on the Bruins? Like, he's their Morgan Frost. He is going to spend his entire career a Boston Bruin.
Morgan Frost, the only guy on Frank Saravalli's trade target list.
Yeah, the only flyer on Frank's list. Yeah.
We all silly like the mayor.